Okay, and I am back. Okay, so remember we were talking about the things that the Clean Air Act does. So the first thing that we're going to talk about really, which is an actual requirement of the Clean Air Act, is that the Clean Air Act requires the EPA to set what we call National Ambient Air Quality Standards, NAAQs. Okay, so those are the EPA sets a maximum level for each pollutant that are allowed to be emitted into the air. Okay, ambient air is outside air, outside the boundaries of one's fence line. So if you want to pump in a pollutant into your office and it doesn't get out, that's one thing. But this is for the rest of the world. Okay, now the NAAQs only apply to these set 6, we call them criteria pollutants. Okay, so carbon monoxide, so that's CO, lead, nitrogen dioxide, ozone. I'll talk about sulfur dioxide, and then particulate matter. So, like dust, right? With a diameter of less than 10 microns. So I don't know what that means. So how small that is. But, like little itty bitty particles would be. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 I created here. Yeah. There are 2 kinds of national ambient air quality standards. The first one is, to protect our health. And then the second one is to protect secondary standard promotes human welfare. Okay. EPA is supposed to reevaluate the NAAQs every 5 years. They don't always do it every 5 years. And NAAQs are source specific, and it's not like each of these pollutants has the same standard, right? The standard varies depending upon which pollutant you're talking about, right? That's your source. Whitman versus American Trucking Association is a Supreme Court case in 2001, which is attached to your module. The Supreme Court held that when the EPA is setting their NAAQs, they can't consider the cost of attaining these NAAQs when they're setting them. They just have to find things that, they have to set a standard that is appropriate to protect human health and to protect human welfare. I think that's a quiz question. Can they consider costs? So keep that in your head. So remember, okay, so let me hit back. Okay, so we have 6 criteria pollutants: carbon monoxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide. Okay, so those are the pollutants that under clean air, the EPA is obligated to set these standards. The Clean Air Act doesn't specifically say that the EPA is obliged to regulate CO2, right? These greenhouse gases. So we've talked about this case before in our our global climate change week. But in 2007, the Supreme Court in Massachusetts versus EPA worked on this. Okay, so the EPA under the Clean Air Act, right? They were dealing with those 6 criteria pollutants, and they were not regulating greenhouse gases. And the various states and associations wanted to compel the EPA to regulate these as part of the Clean Air Act. So the question for the Supreme Court under the Clean Air Act: does the EPA have the statutory authority to regulate these emissions? And the second question is, if yes, are there reasons for not regulating them okay under the Clean Air Act? Okay, so we found out that these emissions created the greenhouse gases in 1990. That was like our science. And then, these citizen groups requested that the EPA regulate them, and took them a while. But in 2003, the EPA said, no, we're not going to, because we're not authorized under the under the Clean Air Act, right? We are limited by our congressional mandate. Clean Air Act does not authorize the EPA to address this. They think it's unwise to set these standards at the times, and if we did regulate it, it would be piecemeal. Okay, and Supreme Court found, you know what? These are pollutants under the Clean Air Act, and their decision not to regulate was arbitrary and capricious, right? So then we know that starting in 2011, the EPA did start regulating these under the Clean Air Act in this piecemeal approach, right? Because no legislation on greenhouse gas regulation has been able to pass. So we're using what we have. We're using the Clean Air Act. Okay, so what happened was, all right, the EPA creates these NAAQs for those 6 criteria pollutants, and then each state is required to come up with their own plan to either, to meet these standards and not exceed these standards, right? And they are called state implementation plans. So this is kind of your second tier or second part of the Clean Air Act, okay? And they're called SIPs, state implementation plans. So if you remember back to like our first slide or so, we talked about how the Congress found that regulating air pollution should be, is the responsibility of the state. Okay, so what happens? EPA sets the standards, and implementing these standards is meeting these standards is the responsibility of the states. Okay, and we are concentrated here in this section with the NAAQs on stationary sources, right? Like factories and plants or whatever those things are, right? Those that don't move. So states create their own state implementation plan based on those NAAQs. And some states have met the NAAQs, right? They are good. They probably, maybe more rural states or smaller states that don't have a lot of industry that creates pollution or uses those criteria pollutants. So they might not have to worry about it. Okay, we call those the states that are under or at the NAAQs. We call those attainment states. Okay, states that don't exceed these NAAQs are called non-attainment states. They haven't attained the standard. Okay, the NAAQs are minimums, and the ones that are non-attainment states have a stricter SIP. Okay, I might come back. I have this. Let me come back to that in a second. It's going to show you some of on the EPA website. Okay, so what are the purpose of these requirements? So they have to demonstrate that they have this air quality management in place. They have all their components in place to meet or do better than the NAAQs. Okay, they identify what requirements that the state will use. What are they going to do to attain or maintain the NAAQs? Okay, and then if you are an attainment state, your SIP is going to concentrating on preventing the deterioration of air quality. And obviously, just so we're not doing any worse than we have, and any area that's in non-attainment, then we're going to reduce them. Okay, so within 3 years of EPA changing or issuing any standard, NAAQ, the states have to submit their SIP And they have general infrastructure elements, right? What do they have? Do they have an associated? Do they have a team of people who inspect? Do they have testing equipment? Things like that. So they have to show the EPA that they have the capacity to attain, maintain, and enforce these NAAQs. Okay. So they have to have things like monitoring and data systems, right? They have to be able to, on a regular basis, check their air quality, check what's in their air. They have to have enforcement programs. Like, what do we do? How do we get people to comply? And if they don't comply, what do we do? Okay. And then authority and resources to implement the plan, money, personnel, stuff like that. Okay. For states that have non-attainment areas, there is an additional requirement. We call that Part D of that. So, and then, the ones that meet the NAAQs are attainment states or attainment areas. And if you're a non-attainment state, you might have additional time. I'll show you that in a second. So this is kind of like a little map of where we can, figure out if we are in attainment or not. So I think ozone is really the only area where in Illinois that we have a problem. So let me get here to show you. Okay, so when we go to Illinois, okay, we are Chicago, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, this kind of like metropolitan area. We have an issue with ozone, okay, moderate non-attainment. So I think this is the map here. No, it's not the map. All right, let me get to the map part because that's kind of helpful just to illustrate. But from when I was looking at this earlier, that's the only thing that we have, and it's kind of that northern corridor of Illinois. And here's the national map of ozone non-attainment areas. Okay. All right. So here, right, this is where we are up here in that northeast side. And then down here, this is down by like St. Louis, so southwestern area. So, but not so bad. Like, look at our color. It's moderate and not red. But look over in California, right? You think of California with all its smog, right? So that's extreme out there. So really, it's only on that West Coast where ozone is really bad. So I'm just going to go to, and when we talk about these numbers, these were the NAAQs published on that date. So these are the 2015 ozone standards, NAAQs. All right, so let me go to carbon monoxide. And you guys can use this link. It's kind of fun that you can, check out where's my map? Do I have a map? Come on. State area. All right, I'll go to, this is non-attainment and maintenance for carbon monoxide. I mean, see, and we don't really have, I'm going to scroll down real fast, but look, nothing for Illinois. So New York, it's in Syracuse, a bunch of places in New Jersey. This is the New York, New Jersey, Long Island area, Connecticut, Indianapolis, they're in maintenance mode. So this is a really cool website. So the website is in the epa.gov/NAAQs. air quality/green book. And you can check out all like where everybody is in all these different areas in maintenance. I think there's like a national map here. If I go to the Green Book home, where is it? Data, GIS, and map downloads. Yeah, it's a little annoying because it's by these criteria pollutants. The PM is particulate matter. Let's see what opens up when I do this map. Where are you, map? Okay, so this page has all of the maps. So it's not like one map per, but I'll just show you. This is an example here of non-attainment statements for particulate matter. Okay, so again, West Coast, right? California, serious and moderate. So it's just, like I could probably spend hours and hours at this page, but I just wanted to show you the difference between attainment and non-attainment, and that the non-attainment ones have special requirements for the NAAQ. Okay, so here is our, this is our, for Illinois, our ozone, and this is the 2008 standard, not even the 2015 standard. But look at our counties where we have to worry about ozone, right? Where we are Lake, McHenry, Kane, DuPage, Will, Cook, right? Oh, and this is Indiana here, Lake and Porter County. So that is the area around here. And then this, for the 2015, these are also yellow, but right now for the 2008, which you would think would be less stringent, are marginal. So this is again, St. Louis area down here. So I think it's kind of fun to look at. So I don't think that we're that bad. If that's as bad as it gets, we're not even that bad. Okay, so for our non-attainment states, we have these additional Part D requirements. Okay, so rather than just staying the course, every year under your SIP for these non-attainment areas, you have to have incremental reductions in the pollutants. So for us, for our area, we have to worry about that ozone. If the state doesn't make progress there, or they have automatic, my kid used to say that, automatic contingency measures. One of the ways that the states control their pollution is through permitting, right? So if you are a factory, you need a permit under the Clean Air Act to emit anything, right? So then they'll have to have stricter permits in non-attainment areas. So if I'm a factory, maybe I don't want to, open up in this corridor where we're non-attainment. Maybe I want to open up somewhere else so that I don't have to worry about these stricter permit requirements. And remember, we talked about the technology standards. So for non-attainment areas, there's a higher level of technology required for both existing sources, existing factories, and new sources, either new equipment in an existing factory or a new factory. If there's any change in these NAAQs, or a significant shift in technology, or our attainment status changes, the states have to revise them. And if the EPA reviews your SIP and says it's deficient, you might have to change it. And if it's really bad, the EPA might have to create their own implementation plan, which is a federal implementation plan called an FIP. All right, let me go back, because in the module, I have some of these Part D requirements posted for you. that's 6. That's the wrong one. Under this other supplemental materials, and if you can't see it on the screen, you can go, pause me and go to your module and look under other supplemental materials. And there's just a little scan, kind of a terrible scan. But then I have it written out too if you can't see. So, oh no, that's the permit provisions. All right, well, this is if you're applying for a permit under the Clean Air Act, you have to list all of your emissions of pollutants, of these criteria pollutants. Oh, all pollutants. Then the regulated air pollutants, all the points where you're putting this stuff out into the air, the rate in tons, and all of your technology. What are your control requirements? And let me see if I have anything else. I think that's it for now. Okay, so we're gonna stop this one. And in your assignment, you have under assignments, reading this case, which is in the textbook right after we're talking about the federal implementation plan. You're going to read a case and answer the questions in there about indirect sources. But actually, before I do that, I want to just show you the EPA site in Illinois about our approved SIPs in Illinois. Okay, so right, there's no FIP. This is where I got that non-attainment areas section. And so let me get to this EPA approved regulations in the Illinois SIP. So these are our state regulations that have been approved by the EPA. All right, bias, conflict, scope, contents, applicability. Here's the, how they do the permits. Proof of emissions. There's a lot of stuff. Compliance. Okay, so those are the approved regulations. And then here is Illinois' source-specific requirements. Right, so these are the stationary sources in Illinois that are regulated under the Clean Air Act, right? So Argonne, that's kind of near us. I don't know where this one is. That's Cook County and Broadview, Chicago, Zion, DuPage, one in Naperville. So you can go in and find out all the information about the SIP for them. So that's fun. Okay, so anywho, I'm going to stop this one and then you can work on the assignment and then come back to video 3.